You saw it in the thumbnail. Today we're going to be making a beautiful steampunk bottle holder. That's coming up. Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Reese. This is Weaver Leather Supply. Today we're going to be making this beautiful steampunk bottle holder. Now, why would you actually want to make this thing? Well, on the fun side of things, let's say you cosplay or LARP or go to Renaissance festivals or anything like that. Well, this obviously fits right into your kit, but it also has a practical use as well. On the practical side of things, the everyday life side of things, if you camp or hike or kayak fish or just like staying hydrated, this thing's going to make your life a lot easier, and it's a way to transport electrolyte powder. These bottles are each 1 ounce, and you can buy electrolyte packets, in the different stores. Most of them have a ½ ounce of electrolyte powder in them, which means you can carry 6 of those packets in these 3 bottles. So where can you actually get these 1 ounce bottles? Well, most craft stores are going to sell it, and that big online shop that we all shop on, you can get them there too. So 1 ounce bottles, make sure you get the plastic ones. The glass ones tend to be so thin that they break really easy, so you definitely want to go with the plastic ones. So with that out of the way, we can go ahead and jump into the project and knock out the prep steps, which in this particular case just means that we're cutting out all the individual pieces of leather that we need for the project. Now, we've got a video coming up where we're going to go into best practices for how to cut different weights of leather, how to cut out patterns for your different projects, that type thing. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. But for now, the big tip that I'm going to give you is to make sure that you punch your holes before you cut out the individual pieces. As we're cutting out the different pieces, if you have a strap cutter, that's going to make your life a lot easier. I mean, yes, we can cut these out with a straight edge, but if you have a strap cutter, Weaver has a magnificent one. If you have a strap cutter, that's definitely the way to go. This is a great time to go ahead and edge bevel the 2 main pieces and one of the straps. But since we're going to be putting them together, we only want to bevel the outer faces. If we bevel the inner edges that are going to touch, well, they'll curl into each other and we won't be able to get that perfect edge that we all aim for. So with this particular leather, and it's the same one that I made the desk pad out of, we'll put a link in the description to it. But with this particular leather, the back of it is almost as gorgeous as the front of it is. So what I've done is the backer piece, I've let the flesh side show. It has kind of a caramel coppery color to it. And then I've put the darker chocolate side up against it to get contrast. And we're going to be doing that with the back and with the loops that actually hold the bottles. Now, if you look at the front piece here, you'll see that there are 3 holes in a line, and then just below that, there's 4 holes in a line. I think my thumb might be covering one of the holes, but the bottom line has 4 holes in it, and that's what we're going to focus on next. Essentially, what we need to do is create bullet loops to hold the bottles, and I want that strap to stop right at the edge of the project, which means I need to pay really close attention to where I put that first hole. To make sure that I get it right, I'm going to be using my wing dividers. By marking from edge of the leather to the center of the hole, I can transfer that measurement over to the strap. Now, you're going to have the pattern, so you won't have to worry about placing those holes. They're going to be really clearly marked. But that skill that I just showed you, where you can measure out and locate where a hole is, or some location is on this particular piece, and then transfer it to another piece so that they match up and line up the way you want them to, that's a really important skill. So that's why I walked you through how I placed those two holes. I wanted to use the wing dividers over here to get my measurements so I could transfer it over to the strap over there so that when we put them together, they match up perfectly. After I punch that hole, I'm going to use a rivet to hold the two pieces together, but notice that I didn't actually set the rivet. I just lightly snapped it together so that it would stay in place. So this is where order of operations really comes into play, and you kind of have to think through things in advance. The challenge that we have, what we're trying to accomplish, is that we want to put these bullet loops across the front to hold the bottles in place. But the problem that we have is that we don't know how long this strap needs to be. Now, there's two different ways we could do this. One is that we could try to measure it out, right? Well, the problem there is the thickness of the leather can vary from your project to my project. So that means that you may end up with a short piece that's perfect for mine, or vice versa. That thickness of the leather can really wreak havoc on your patterns. So what do we actually do? How do we kind of get past this challenge? Well, let's take what we know. First of all, we know where the first hole is going to be, and we know that we want the edge of the strap to line up with the edge of the project. So what we've done is we've cut that, we've rounded off the end of the strap, and we've put our hole in the correct location so that it'll line up. From there, we need to punch all the holes in the right spot. But to do that, we're going to do them one at a time. And there's a trick to it that I'm going to show you. And this is the part that order of operations really plays a big factor in. If I go in, I cut my strap, I mark all my holes, I punch them, I do them one at a time, and I get it perfect, and I go ahead and secure it to the main piece of leather, that front piece of leather, well, there's a step that we've missed in there. We have a strap that's attached to the leather that hasn't had the edges beveled or burnished yet. So we've got to do that before we can attach it to the leather. Now, why didn't I just do it from the beginning when I cut everything out? Well, we don't know how long the strap needs to be. So yes, we could have done it then, picked up the bevel, the burnisher, and redone it after we adjusted everything. But personally, I like to do everything at once. So what I'm going to be doing is, you're going to see me, I'm measured and located the first hole, and then I'm going to place each individual hole to make sure they're accurate. I'm going to get it cut to the right length. Then I'm going to go back with my edge bevel, my burnisher, and my gum trag, and my die to make sure those edges on the strap look really good. But we're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit with that, but I wanted to kind of help you think through the process of when you need to do what and plan for it. But like I said, we're getting ahead of the process just a little bit. The first thing that we need to do is actually locate and punch the individual holes for the strap. So how do we actually get the holes in the right place? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the strap around the bottle and push it down onto the leather so that it's very snug against the bottle. We really want a good tight fit. Then I'm going to use my awl to mark where that next hole would go. With the hole marked, I can then spin that strap around, punch the second hole, and then I can repeat the process until I get to the end. So once you've got all the holes marked and punched, you can tack them in place with the rivets and go ahead and cut the end of the strap to length. Now, we want to mark it, then take it off the project and then cut it. Otherwise, we run the risk of nicking or scratching our project. But tack it in place, mark it, cut the end of it so that both ends of it match. Now, you might be thinking, okay, we can go ahead and set the rivets, but we want to go back to our order of operations. If I go ahead and put the rivets in place and set them, well, I haven't done the edge beveling yet, and I haven't burnished it. So we need to do that before we set our rivets. So we want to go in, we want to bevel the edges, we want to apply the dye with a marker or a dauber, and then we want to use our gum trag and our slicker to slick the edges of our strap. When we burnish the strap, let's go ahead and burnish that top edge of essentially what's going to be the pocket. Once we put these two pieces of leather together, we won't be able to burnish that top edge either. So when you burnish the strap, let's go ahead and burnish that top edge of the pocket. Next up, we're going to need to punch the holes in that back piece. Now, if you're using the pattern that we've printed out and you're following along with the video, you may have already punched these holes, but you're kind of watching me develop it as it's created. So I'm going to be punching the holes now, even though in your kit, your packet, it probably already had you do that. You're just ahead of the game. I need to get caught up. So what are these holes actually for? Well, what we're going to be doing, you'll notice that there's an upper row of holes and a lower row of holes. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to be running lacing through those and use it as a cinch to tighten the bottles down, just kind of as a backup to make sure that they don't come out. So now we're at the part where we can go ahead and start planning out how we're going to join these two main pieces together. And there's one challenge that we need to think about here. So we've got a stitch line that needs to go all the way around, but we've got a strap in the middle. So the question we need to answer is, do we want the stitch line to go through that stitch? And I personally don't like that idea. I don't think it would look good. So that leaves us with a couple of choices, a couple of options here. One is that I could start above the strap, stitch a little bit, skip the strap, start again and work across the bottom of it, skip the strap, and then do the top on the other side. Or I can just do the bottom of the pouch right here, and then we can add a rivet up top later. So we're going to go ahead and grab our wing dividers, set them to 1/4 inch, and lightly mark a line all the way around the bottom half under that strap. This is where our stitch line is going to go. But to hold it together, to hold it in place so it doesn't slide around on us while we're punching those holes, we're going to tack it together with Leather Crafters cement. But we want to scratch up the surface just a little bit where the glue's going to be. So the area right along the border under this outer, shorter piece of leather, we want to take our awl and go around and scratch in just a little bit so that the glue has something to hold to. And we want to do that on the backer piece and on the front piece. Just make sure your scratches don't go above this front piece right here. That would be very difficult to cover up. So we've got our stitch line marked, we've got the insides of them scratched up and roughed up so the glue has something to hold to, but we don't want to actually add the glue just yet. We have these cinches that we need to put in place, and we need to do that before we join the two pieces of leather together. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult to get them in the project without scratching it up. So that's the first thing that we need to do, is go ahead and add the cinches. Then we can glue it together. We're going to need 6 pieces of lacing. I'll make sure to put the measurements up on the screen. And we're going to be using the shorter ones first. We're going to use those as a pull tag. Now, I've tried a couple of different times to actually explain this so that it makes sense, but I start sounding like an IKEA instruction manual where you insert tab A into slot B and that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain it as basically as I can and let you watch the video, because the video explains it really well. I'm just going to feed the longer piece of lacing through the hole on the back piece of leather. That's going to create a loop. Then I'm going to take the shorter one and cinch it down on top of that larger loop that we created first. Do that 3 times. Then we're going to feed the tails through the back piece from the inside. So you should have 2 tails sticking out of each hole on the back of the project. Then you just want to tie a loose knot in the tails so that it doesn't slip out as we're trying to maneuver it. Now we can go through, add a small bead of leather crafter cement, position it right, and clamp it together and let the glue set. To punch the holes, I'm going to start by taking my 2-tine punch. And I'm going to punch those first 2 holes right up against the strap. Then I'm going to switch over to my single tine and punch 1 hole in the curve. Then I'm going to switch over to my 6 and punch all the way down to the other curve. Now, when you get to the curve on the other end, the holes might not fit perfectly. So the easy way to do it is to get your single tine chisel or punch and just manually space them out. Just make sure you don't get them too close together, or the thread can actually pull through and create 1 hole instead of 2. So now we can go ahead and actually stitch it together. And my favorite thread is going to be the Ritza Tiger thread. We're going to go ahead and stitch this together with a saddle stitch. If you don't know how to do a saddle stitch, we have a video that goes into detail on exactly how to do it. So I'll make sure that we put a link in the description so you can find that video. I'm gonna go ahead and punch the holes and add the rivets to the corners so we can get those secured down. Setting a rivet is super simple. We're just gonna drop our little anvil, that little small silver disc, under the rivet under the project. It has a flat side and a concave side. We're using double cap rivet, so I'm gonna use the concave side and just tap it into place with a maul and the setter. If you find that your rivets, instead of setting correctly, they're going sideways on you, that's usually an indication that your rivet is too long. If you'll drop down to the shorter, like one step down, it usually will solve that problem. But if it goes sideways, that means that you're either hitting it at an angle or your rivet's too long. We're not done with the project yet, but you can finally see how those cinches are gonna work. So now that we have the two pieces stitched together, we can go ahead and burnish the edges. The reason we didn't want to do this before we assembled it is because it would create two pieces of leather with really nice edges on it. And what we want is a single piece of leather, at least the appearance of a single piece of leather that has a nice burnished edge on it. So we want to wait until we put it together to burnish the edges. That's another one of those order of operation things. So why wouldn't I just wait till the end of the project to burnish all the edges? Well, we still need to add in the straps to go along the top. And if we wait to burnish the edges until we've added them, we'll have to work around the straps. And it's just easier if we go ahead and do it now instead of waiting and working around the other pieces. This particular piece of leather is really tightly knitted together, so it didn't need the extensive burnishing process where we use sandpaper and wax and all that kind of stuff. Really, all I had to do was just apply the dye to the edge, and I'm using Phoebing's Pro Dye in chocolate and a Weaver marker to apply it to the edge. So all I really had to do was just add the dye to the edge with the marker, add a little bit of gum trag, and then use my slicker. So next up and last is we need to add the belt loops to the top of the project. Now we got a couple of different ways that we can do this. We can go with one loop on each side that's attached directly to the project, or we can have a D-ring that's attached to the project and then the loop attached to that. The benefit of the second option where we have a D-ring, then the loop, is that if we ever have to remove those loops, we don't run the risk of damaging the project. We can either cut the rivets, drill the rivets, or just cut the leather and take it off, and then reattach brand new leather to those D-rings. So let's cut out the straps, punch the holes, bevel, and burnish the sides. Once we've done that, we can take the two shorter pieces, add the D-ring, and rivet them in place. Then we can repeat the process with the belt loops. So one quick note here is that you're going to want to check to make sure the belt loops that we've included in the pattern fit the belt that you're going to be using it with. If you have an extra wide belt, like in some of the Renaissance Festival kits, then you're definitely going to want to make a larger, longer belt loop. So just check that before you actually cut the belt loops to size to make sure it fits your belt. So with that, all we have to do is just set the rivets and we're done. So if you decide to make this project, post it if you're comfortable, post it in the Chuck Dorsett group on Facebook and tag me. I would love to see how your project turned out. Well, that's going to do it for this video. I will see you in the next one. In the meantime, go make something amazing.